in my public library in New York, when I joined, I just had to show evidence that I had an address just so that they would know where I lived in case they needed to send me a piece of mail, right? That was it. And there's a movement in US libraries to do away with even that, right? Because we know that anything that requires you to come and present some official form of documentation is a form of exclusion. None of that is in play in Buffalo Creek. It's free to everyone. Anyone can walk in and use it. The library is also safe, regardless of gender, race, or economic condition. Ms. Tackett was telling us that one of her favorite things about the library is that people in the community will just call them and say, hey, have you seen my brother? Have you seen my uncle? And she'll say, oh, yeah, he was just here in the library. We visited another library in Rossville, Kansas, a community a little bigger, about 1,200 people, and we heard the same thing. When somebody, we haven't seen your kid, call the library, they'll be there. The library is warm and welcoming, a home for everyone, an engine of joy and an engine of laughter. This is a crucial piece of public libraries that I think we often miss. If we're focused on what the library can produce in terms of some developmentalist approach, we miss the part where just coming in and having a good time with your friends, that's something that should belong to all of us. And most importantly, the library belongs to the people. Everyone we talked to was very clear that this is my library, right? That they owned it, it belonged to them. And just the same, the people belong to the library. Everything that the Tacketts do to make that library work is about the people that they serve, which includes them. They're a part of that community also. Now, these are rare elements of public life in the United States. They're found in the library and perhaps nowhere else. We have public parks that are increasingly subject to public-private partnerships, where the library is, or where the park is funded in part by the public trust, but also corporations pay. And guess what happened? I live in Brooklyn, New York. Have you heard of the Brooklyn Bridge? Has anyone seen it? Beautiful, iconic, gorgeous. When the park there engaged in a public-private partnership, they put up a big, giant apartment building, right? So you're walking along the park path, which I used to be a kind of serious runner, and I would run, and you'd come around the bend, and the bridge would open up, and that feeling it would give me is now foreclosed, and I'll never have it again, because an apartment building that are very expensive, mostly sold for pied-à-terres, for the global elite, has blocked that view. Our public schools are increasingly defunded as states give money to private schools in lieu of public education. We have our roads and bridges, much like the roads and bridges I've seen here in India, increasingly toll-based, right? So that only those who can afford to drive on the road can drive on them. So protecting and expanding public goods and access to public space and access to public life, that is the struggle in the United States. And the library, as a site for organizing around those things, is the sort of energy that we are trying to bring to the public library movement in the US. Now, the extreme right wing in the United States understands well that the library is not just a space for reading, although it is that, but that it is also a tool for engaging in broader political and social struggle. So the right, highly organized, right? Highly organized, building power, day by day, consolidating wealth, extracting from the public purse. And they have targeted libraries because we are, I believe, the public institution, the best example of what a public institution should be. Over the last 4 years, we have seen double-digit increases every year, to the numbers of books that are being challenged in libraries. An ongoing organized censorship movement that is part of the ongoing assault on the public good that has been going on for my entire lifetime. I'm looking at 50 years old. I can't remember a time in my life where there was a concerted investment in the people. Not once. They opened a big new branch of the New York Public Library. The circulating collection got a $125 million renovation that made it a glittering, gorgeous space. It doubled the number of places to sit down. It opened up a public outdoor terrace where you can see a view. Going up and seeing a view, very expensive in the United States. The week that it opened, $125 million renovation, the city signed design and build contracts for $8.3 billion in new jail construction. The investment made in the library paled next to the investment in cages, right, for people. But the censorship piece, which has been sort of activated my entire last couple of years. The first thing that the extreme right does when they organize against libraries is they target books. They know that reading is powerful. They know that reading helps us understand ourselves, and that reading helps us understand each other, and that reading is a practice of developing a shared collective analysis of how we have come to find ourselves in this place and what we can do to make the world different. The first target is books by LGBTQ plus people, particularly books by transgender authors and about transgender people and experience. They want to wipe us off the map. It's an eliminationist plan. They're targeting the books, but anytime they target the books, we know they're targeting the people. They target Black authors and Black experience. The African American story in the United States is deep in the DNA of our country. The oppression of Black people. Those histories, they want to remove them completely from the public conversation. Indigenous authors and experience. Books written by Native peoples in the United States removed from the collection. Recently, there was news that the National Archivist of the United States, in response to what she sees, I think quite rightly, as a coming attack on all of us that will be on a scale that I also have been lucky to not see in my lifetime. In response to that, she made changes to an exhibit in the National Archives that was supposed to that highlights American history through documents collected in the archives. She removed any artifact about Indigenous experience in the country, replacing and about the civil rights era. There was a part of the display that was about the civil rights movement. It was removed and changed out for a part of the exhibit that's now about Elvis Presley. That is the kind of erasure of public stories and public history that we're seeing in libraries and archives today. Immigrant authors and experience, books about disabled experience. They're targeting these books and they want to remove them. After targeting the books, they target the public library. They take over library boards. In Downers Grove, Illinois, a group of book banners who wanted to remove and erase the experience of people of color tried to take over the board. But Downers Grove organized, fought back, and won the day. And so this is kind of a grim scenario, but there are some wins, and they're small. They're not big enough, but it's important to own them. There are attempts to outsource public library services to private profit-seeking corporations. In Huntington Beach, California, a long-time public library, they're now organizing to fire the library staff and bring in a private company that would lower wages and eliminate public support for this institution. In some parts of the country, they are cutting funding entirely to the library. There's a new law that I just learned about yesterday in South Dakota that's proposed by the governor of that state that would prohibit any library from accepting funds from the federal government. Funds from the federal government in the United States to public libraries pay for things like after-school programs, food programs that feed hungry people in different communities, internet access. And as much as we might, and I have a robust critique that maybe we'll get a chance to talk about later today of a sort of digital-only or digital-first approach to the library experience, the internet is a lifeline for everything in the United States. If you don't have an email address, you cannot access public benefits. And, our policymakers believe everybody has access to the internet and everybody has an email address, but if you ask a public librarian, they'll let you know that is simply not true. And finally, violent threats against librarians that drive them out of the profession. People are harassed, people are followed home from work by people with guns. It's really real. The fight is really real. In the US, we're in an ongoing struggle to protect our public libraries and to defend our public libraries against these attacks. What I've learned here in India is the fight for a public library system, this fight for a public library system that is free and open to all. That is the struggle here. These are linked struggles in the face of a global turn toward the privatization of all good things for the benefit of private profit. Schools and parks, roads and bridges, water, garbage pickup, even the air in some parts of the world. I believe that libraries can be the solution to much of this. They are sites for organizing collectively around issues that are broader than simply reading a book. Although I don't want to say that reading a book is not important. Reading a book is crucial, right? As a lesbian growing up in Boise, Idaho, in the 1970s, I guess 1980s. I don't think I was a lesbian when I was 5. Well, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, a conversation for lunch. But growing up, I didn't see any representation of lesbians anywhere. There were 2 lesbians who ran an antique store up on Overland Road. That was it. Cherry and her wife, right? Or her partner. We couldn't get married then. I found myself in books. I found myself through Alison Bechdel, who is my favorite lesbian cartoonist, who, if you haven't read her work, you should. I remember opening one of her books and seeing a picture of a person with this haircut, right? And I was like, that haircut, I want that haircut. And what is amazing about seeing ourselves reflected in books is that we can come to understand who we are, and then we can come to understand that we are part of a broader community. Then everyone who read Alison Bechdel, who saw themselves in that book, they were a sure friend of mine, right? And it was through reading and through the publication of materials about who we are that we come to understand ourselves and build community around each other. When we fight for the library, when we organize for that space where anyone can walk in, and it's not just books, but in New York City, the public library is the only place where you can go inside and use the washroom without having to pay. Only place, nowhere else. It's fundamental, right? It's the only place you can go in and get a drink of water. The only place where you can go and get cool when it's hot, get hot when it's cool. I was visiting a library in a very, very snowy part of Washington State, and every winter they open the doors so that people who do not have homes or who would be sleeping in their unheated cars can go into the library and spend the night. They installed a shower, right? So you can take a shower. It's a space that solves communities for people. Libraries are about equal access to public space for everyone, regardless of gender or sexuality, race or caste, economic class. They're about inclusion and belonging, about building a sense that we belong here. It was so wonderful to be in Dibrugarh because I felt like I belonged. And it had been a long time, longer than I knew, since I had felt like I belonged somewhere, where the sense of love in the Feminist Resource Center that we're going to be lucky enough to hear about later today